everyone, and welcome back to Bonus Pages. It's been literally a year since I've last done a reading wrap-up, so I thought that it was time to change that. July was a pretty hectic month for me. I've been catching up with college stuff, catching up on languages, paying some long overdue doctor visits. Yes, I hope you never have to get your wisdom teeth removed. Yeah, it's just been really busy. I've also been hanging out with friends and spending time with family and just enjoying being home for the first time in 6 months. So with that, because it was so hectic, I didn't quite have a lot of time to read, so it wasn't the best reading month. But I still managed to read 10 books and the genres were very diverse, so overall I'm quite satisfied with the reading month because the majority of the books I read I quite enjoyed, and I think that's the main thing. As usual, I've linked reviews and other content in the description box, but let's dive straight into the reading wrap-up. Up first, Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. This was actually a book club pick. In case you guys don't know, I have a book club over on Discord. It's very chill, there's no obligation. You don't even have to join, even if you're a member of the club, to read the book. Just if you've read the book and if you've been following the loose reading schedule, you can just type up your thoughts whenever you feel like it, and we all just have a place to share our thoughts, basically. But I'm very happy we ended up going for Small Things Like These because I met Keegan for the first time as a writer, and the meeting was honestly quite incredible because her short sentences really pack a powerful punch, and she's truly a master of short fiction. It's a very short novel, but she manages to fit so much in terms of plot and characterization, and her writing just has that very special quality that makes it very memorable, that makes you think about the book long after you've read it. Small Things Like These is set in a small Irish town in 1985, and the main character, Bill Furlong, is a coal merchant with 3 daughters and a wife to support. So he's busy working during Christmas because that's the busiest time of the year, of course, since he has to deliver coal to all the people who are heating up their homes. The neighborhood is very poor, and the poverty serves as a reminder for him that if he fails, his daughters can end up looking like the kids on the street. But to make matters worse, there seems to be a convent operating in the town that exploits the vulnerable, and everybody's happy to stay silent and complicit because very conveniently, right around Christmas time, the convent hands out envelopes full of money, and they also have a lot of influence over the only schools in town that are Catholic. So, you know, small things like these. I would actually recommend reading this book around the winter months rather than in July because I think it serves as a very powerful Christmas tale. It manages to both be a reminder of true goodness, raise questions about Christian values, and also talk about kindness and empathy. I think the work is called Small Things Like These because every element of the story really piles up, from the people choosing to stay silent, from Bill Furlong passing this convent for the first time, from his wife saying, "Stay out of it, it's none of our business." All these small things keep piling on until the entire town is complicit and part of this guild. And what makes it really special for me is the way Keegan actually presents the story, her attention to detail. The detail makes all the characters come alive, step off the page, and it feels like you've been living in this town for years, even though it's a story that's less than 100 pages essentially. The symbolism in the snow was remarkable. It served as not only a backdrop, as a setting for this Christmas story, but also as a symbol of just how quickly things can collapse and how the beautiful can quickly turn ugly. I mean, it's far from the usual banality of these kinds of Christmas novels, and I think it's a thought-provoking must-read, perfect for fans of Dubliners or Snow Country. Up next, Tales for Big Kids, which was my absolute lucky find in a random basement of a bookshop in Moscow. I mean, where else can you find such an obscure tale that was, barely published essentially? This one has less than 100 reviews on all the popular Russian reading sites, so this one is quite obscure, and I'm willing to bet 200 rubles, the cost of this book, which is about £2, that you've probably never heard of it. So I've been a fan of Zamatin ever since I read We, which is my unpopular opinion. It's far better than 1984. The writing is better. It's actual predictions rather than a retrospective look back from the future on the past. It takes into account the nuances of the Soviet Union very, very well. It also makes you far more invested in the characters' stories, and the characters are far more complex, and they don't serve the story, rather they just enhance it, and it makes you feel like you really are a part of the story because you really genuinely care about these people. And I honestly think that if we wasn't smuggled out of the USSR in poor translation and barely marketed, it would have been far more of a success than 1984. I then recently read an essay titled I Am Afraid by Zamatin, which is all about the excesses of the Bolsheviks coming to power and how this can mean the end to good literature and the future of literature, especially given the prevalent censorship of the time. So I actually made a post on this on Instagram, and luckily this has an English translation, so I think it's a very good read that you should check out. I'll link it in bio. Zamatin's writing is a very unique mix of political satire and critique that's perfectly worded in a way that makes you say, the man's got a point. Like, even if you don't agree with what he's saying, I think he has a very insightful take on certain things, and that makes for a fascinating read always, no matter whether you hold the same opinion or not. And that is why I purchased this book right here. So Tales for Big Kids is essentially Zamatin being like, guys, humanity, please listen to me, what we're doing is not great right now. But of course nobody listened. All of these stories have the same tone of this perfect blend of humor and actual critique, and they're all thought-provoking and unique in certain ways. And I didn't love all of the stories because some of them are quite short. They're less than 1 page, they're around half a page, like 5 or 6 sentences. But even so, a lot of these packed a punch, so I would still recommend this short story collection, because even if you don't like the entire collection, there will be some short stories that really stick with you. So there's 2 stories in particular that I would like to highlight. So one is Arabe, or Arabs, which was actually a term used for foreigners, for most foreigners, but it is essentially Arabs. So of course, given like the emphasis on orthodox behavior and on national unity, the term has quite racist connotations essentially. But what Zamatin ironizes here, which I think is very, very revolutionary, is the fact that a lot of the people who were calling these foreigners uncivilized, and there was a lot of racism against ethnic minorities in Russia back then, still is unfortunately, they themselves were not quite the most civilized people. So in the story, essentially, there are 2 islands separated by a river, and on one island there are the white men, and on the other island there are the Arabs. And so what happens is the story begins with a white narrator telling how they ate this other Arab guy, you know, just some casual cannibalism from the 20th century, and that they really enjoyed the meal and how good he tasted and all of these kind of disgusting details. And then the next day, because they ate the guy, the Arabs swim across and they also steal a white man and they eat him. And then the whole thing is just the white narrator being like, oh, they're so uncivilized, I can't believe they're acting in this way, it's so inhumane to eat another human being, how could they do this? It just proves how uncivilized they are, of course completely missing the hypocrisy. I mean, the fact that Zamatin wrote it from the 20th century at the time of this publication, when people were not talking about these things, when people were scared to write, let alone talk about the issues of ethnic minorities, is I think already pretty revolutionary. And the fact that he wrote it so well in, I kid you not, this much text is also fascinating to me. And I have another story that I want to quickly highlight. So that one is about this man who became a king, who was elected to be king, but he was a fool. He made a variety of different orders that were all foolish and stupid, but the main one was when he said, I want everyone to be fools, so nobody challenges my reign. They weren't thinking at all, they weren't communicating well, and the man was happy because finally he had a kingdom he could completely control. And then the next day somebody came in and said, well, if everybody has to be fools, that includes you. And so they said, we can't have a fool for a king, and they kicked him out. And that's the end of the story, and everybody in the kingdom lived happily ever after as fools. Really illustrative of how governments sometimes operate, and the best advertisement I've ever read for political literacy. Pilu of the Woods. I won't give this one too much detail as I've already filmed a video on it and baked a recipe from there, but essentially this is a middle grade novel that revolves around a girl trying to deal with anger issues after her mother's death. She's treated as an outsider at school. It's very difficult for her to make friends. She can't control her emotions well, and after a fight with her sister, she runs off into the woods. In the woods, she meets this forest spirit called Pilu, who has also run away from her home because she had an argument with her mother. Willow talks to her, makes friends with her, but essentially she realizes that she's furious at this wood spirit because she's having an argument with her mother, and Willow would do anything to have her mother back. Her emotions then come into this world as monsters that eat her up from the inside, as a symbol of those things, but in actual monster form, endangering both her and the wood spirit. I think this is perfect for younger kids dealing with similar issues like anxiety and fear and maybe depression and things like that. But honestly, I don't think it's anything particularly revolutionary. I mean, it's more of all the go on nature walks, eat good food, talk with your family stuff. And I just think kids nowadays have heard most of these things before, and this book would probably not replace proper therapy for serious issues. So I would recommend it if you want a quick read to look at beautiful illustrations, and I mean the representations of these emotions are well done, I would say, but overall it's not a particularly revolutionary middle grade novel that I think is a must read. If you haven't seen this next book everywhere, you clearly haven't been out much, because Yellowface by R.F. Kuang is as ubiquitous as racism in the publishing industry according to the novel. So the book revolves around June Hayward and her friend Athena Liu. So June is basic American, boring as she refers to herself, and Athena is Asian American. And essentially what happens is that Athena is the more successful one out of the two of them. She has Netflix deals, she makes 6 figures, her book is a success, everybody knows Athena, and June just fades into the distance as an obscure writer whose only attempts at publishing have been such a failure that she doesn't want to even try it again. And Athena and June go out for drinks, and then they come home and they have a pancake eating contest. And Athena chokes on a pancake and June is unable to save her. And so she watches her best friend die. But the thing is, right before she died, she showed her a manuscript she was working on about Chinese labor forces in the World War. And so what June decides to do as a very ethical and amazing and respectable friend, she takes the manuscript and she decides to publish it after reworking it and editing it as her own work. The issue, of course, is that June doesn't know anything about Chinese labor corps. She's white, she has a bit of a savior complex where she decides that, oh, I don't like these parts of the story, and so she changes them to make them more palatable to the wider audience. And of course, since she isn't Chinese and she feels worried about people telling her this isn't your story to tell, she takes a racially ambiguous photo for her author profile, and she takes her middle name, which is Song because her mother was a hippie in the 70s, to publish under the name Juniper Song, which of course sounds far more Chinese and far more suitable to the content of the novel that she's publishing. So that's the plot in its most simple terms, and it's like watching a train wreck that you know is about to crash because it's so addicting and so intense. I couldn't help but feel a sort of like twisted pleasure in watching June scrabble to be like, I'm not responsible for this, I'm not racist, but like, I think Athena deserved what came to her. So if you are a fan of morally great characters and absolutely flawed decisions that make you say, how could you even think of this? This one is for you. Reading this is a delicious confrontation with some of your own inherent biases, assumptions, and ethics, and it felt like R.F. Kuang was quoting straight from Twitter with the bitterness and the resentment and the plain hypocrisy sometimes, because hearing June be like, I'm not racist, but she's successful because she's Chinese, not because she deserves it, and being like, oh, I'm being unfairly cancelled because of racist people, and and liberals rather than me committing plagiarism and potentially murder. The incredible part is that at certain moments, Kwang makes us empathize with June until we snap out of it and realize who's the true narrator. Because I think the issue that most people are overlooking here is that June actually doesn't come from a racist place. So, I mean, she has her racist assumptions, obviously, in saying like, oh, she's only successful because she's Chinese. But it's more so that her actions are stemmed by jealousy and resentment, rather than a particular hatred for Chinese people. At times, I honestly found myself believing that this was a memoir rather than a fictional story because of how accurate and relevant certain things were. And I would highly recommend this book to anyone interested in the publishing industry and getting a closer insider look. Yellowface asks us who has the right to tell a story, but it does not provide a definitive answer. Rather, it leads us on to think for ourselves and provides both aspects. I personally, I'm going to get stones thrown at me, don't think that just because June wasn't Chinese, she didn't have the right to tell a story about Chinese people. Because I mean, literature is about fiction and about imagination, and if we said you can only write about things that you personally know, we wouldn't have a lot of good fiction out there. But at the same time, her justifications and her actions were not always justified. So I think this was quite a nuanced take, and genuinely the only thing that stopped me from giving this 5 stars was the ending, because I felt like it was rushed and it went against everything that June was believing up to this point. So I don't think it really fit in with the majority of the story, but I would still recommend this one because it is something different and it is something new on the table. Big Swiss is a novel about a woman who transcribes therapy sessions, and she falls in love with one of the patients. I mean, this was just a very grotesque trauma dump essentially, but it wasn't as depressing as you would expect it to be. There was the occasional dialogue that made me cackle, but I think that comedy is very, very personal, and this one just missed the mark for me. Part of the humor, I suppose, was in the surprise of the content and just how much trauma you would expect per centimeter squared of a certain written page. But for me, it just felt like insensitive banalities to hear jokes about anorexia and suicide and other potentially triggering topics done in this way. I mean, if it was more thinly veiled perhaps, or more clever, I don't know. It's difficult to explain exactly what it is, but the humor just didn't land with me. I mean, their whole relationship between these two women was simply a breach of privacy. It wasn't built on any healthy emotions, and there wasn't really any explanation for their chemistry. They were attracted just because they were both doing the wrong thing. Literary novels like these are typically my thing because they tend to have beautiful writing and bring something new to the table that wasn't there before. But this one just missed the mark. It felt like I was reading an amalgam of all the existing women love women stories and Otasha Moshfegh's novels. Oh, and the constant complaining about millennials was really getting old. I mean, the whole thing started to give Karen vibes, and that just did not align with Greta's character. The writing was also not particularly enthralling, and I feel like I came away more with disappointment rather than engagement. The whole thing did not feel cohesive, and the pacing was heavily off, so I would not listen to the hype. There are better things out there. Continuing on with the hater energy, let's talk about I'm a Fan, which as it turned out, I was far from being a fan, because this book read like if Rupi Kaur took all of her one-line poetry and made it into a novel. The same random sentences, the same one-word lines, the same banalities about love, and it seems the same sales, because everybody touted this book as being revolutionary in talking about jealousy and approaching amorous relationships. But the only thing revolutionary about this one was how much it made me want to scream at the main character, and it's yet another trite example of an overused plot. I usually love stories like this, where the main character is so flawed that in a children's story they would be the villain, But the issue here was definitely the writing, the incessant whining about things we've heard a million times before. I mean, girl meets guy, guy has a wife, girl thinks I can change him, girl thinks, oh, it doesn't matter that we're having an affair, girl discovers she's just one girl among many other girls, and then the guy says, sorry girl, you're not the best for me after all, when she wants more attention and more love and more time from him. And then girl begins to obsess over the guy's other girls and compare herself to them constantly. Then girl realizes she's worth more than that. Yay, feminism. Except I hate that this is presented as feminism because she learns her worth and quits the guy. I mean, learning your worth is, first of all, a whole wide world human being quality, and second of all, I wouldn't mind it so much if she didn't spend the majority of the book hating on other women and then be like, oh my god, the guy is horrible, he's pitting me against other women, while continuing to engage in misogynistic behavior. And this is what we're presenting as empowering literature, because it honestly, it takes two to tango, and they're both to blame. Yes, of course, the guy cheats on his wife, but the girl isn't any better. She knowingly sleeps with the guy, knowing that he has a wife and other girls. She stalks the other girls. Oh, and none of the characters were actually developed beyond their archetypes of the perfect guy, not, and the girl who's that girl who's the perfect girl who everyone obsesses over on Instagram. There was good representation of stuff you can obsess over on social media, but that's about it. All the Lovers in the Night, meanwhile, was far more to my taste. The main character is Fuyoko, who works as a editor, essentially as a copyright editor, I believe, but essentially her job is to just read over manuscripts and find all the faults and research all the things that are questionable. And she lives in Tokyo, in a region where it isn't easy to make friends. She's an outsider at work. Nobody really talks to her. She doesn't have a life beyond her job. And when a friend offers to transfer to another job where she doesn't even have to leave the house, she happily accepts. Except then she quickly realizes just how sad her life has become, that she's not even leaving the house, and she realizes that she needs a change of pace. She then begins to turn to alcohol because it helps her find an extra boost of confidence. Then she meets a guy who she can't be her true self around him because she really likes him and she wants that boost of confidence. This book will make you feel all the emotions. It's melancholic and it's all about women and society, love, and the good and bad sides of life. Fuyoko's terrifying descent into alcoholism is nothing but an endless spiral and a waste of time, a waste of money, and a waste of health. It makes you want to yell at her, somehow reach her from the pages of the book and say, please get out, please stop this toxic behavior, but it's impossible, and this silence makes it unbearable to read, but also impossible to tear your eyes away from it. If you haven't read Japanese literature before, this one has the nostalgia and the atmosphere and the vibes, but it lacks perhaps the strange elements that are usually present in Japanese literature, both by Miyako Kawakami and other giants of the genre. So I would say that if you want something more normal and more quiet, because Fuyoko is an introvert, and I would say that this book would resonate with all the introverts who at some point have dreamed of getting away from society, then this is the book for you. It's definitely more character driven than plot driven, and I would say that while we don't know Fuyoko, we can definitely empathize with her and feel a sort of kinship towards her from the get-go. The emotions she feels are pretty universal. The fear to die alone, the fear to lose everything, the fear to be a nobody, the fear to realize that you have no friends. It feels like walking in a garden alone on a moonlit night, alone with your thoughts. And it's honestly not my favorite Miyako Kawakami novel. I definitely prefer Heaven, but it's a lovely read for those days that you want mood reading. I will keep my little summary of the next work short because I spent 40 minutes talking about Roadside Picnic 2 weeks ago, and while I could probably still talk about it for 2 or more hours, I don't think this is the best use of time in this video particularly, so I will just link the video and just briefly tell you what it's about here. Roadside Picnic is a work of fantastic science fiction that's all about first contact without actual alien contact. Thank you for this comment. I think that sums it up perfectly because it's more about about the social and political sides of the visitation, and it's all about happiness and the pursuit of happiness and the desires that you want and the desires that society imposes on you. So saying that it's about first contact without actual aliens is, I think, perfect. And I also just want to thank you for leaving this comment because I really do appreciate your support and your engagement on every video. It's always interesting for me to read your thoughts. Okay, so genuinely I hope that this motivated you to pick up the book and check out the video, because it's more than science fiction. It's honestly such a thought-provoking philosophical read that is sure to stay in your head for weeks after. So check out the video and check out the book. Only Dull People Are Brilliant at Breakfast by Oscar Wilde is not actually a book. Rather, it's a collection of the various quotes that Oscar Wilde has said, because if he was alive today, he would be the king of Twitter. His wit, his famous aphorisms, it's something else entirely. And I love Wilde. If you've been following this channel for a long time, then you know that. I mean, The Picture of Dorian Gray is one of my favorite classics. The Importance of Being Earnest has a whole series on my channel devoted to it. I have an endless array of Oscar Wilde merch, from stickers to pins. I mean, I genuinely love that man, and this is me crossing my fingers and manifesting that this year I managed to get the chance and the time and the funds to finally go and visit his grave in Ireland. I mean, that is my genuine dream, because if he had published his grocery lists, I would honestly read those. I doubt he would have, because he doesn't seem like a man focused on more homely affairs, but nonetheless, I genuinely would have read everything that he had written, because I am stretching out all his works along my lifetime. I don't want to read all of them in a single sitting, because I could never get enough, and I could not go in this video without reading at least one quote. And given that we've talked about all the lovers in the night, I think the quote on absence is pretty suitable. After the first class, you see things as you wish they were. After the second, you see things as they are not. Finally, you see things as they really are, and that is the most horrible thing in the world. In conclusion, get this mini book for Oscar Wilde fans, and they will love you forever. That's me. I'm the Oscar Wilde fan. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. A Doll's House, the final book of this video. I know it's been a while. Oh my god, I took off my watch. I actually do have a post on this on my Instagram, Paulina's pages, but I'm thinking that I'll definitely make a video on it here at some point, because of its importance in literature as a play, and also, of course, because I think it would be helpful for those who are studying the play. But I do have to get through the A-level content stuff first, because I promised I'd get it done by the exam series of 2024. This play is considered to be a seminal feminist text that revolves around Nora and her husband Torvald. When her husband falls sick, Nora borrows money to help pay for his treatment, which of course the husband doesn't know. And then the shady man she borrows money from shows up and blackmails her and says that she has endangered her husband's reputation and she has done something illegal. And she of course did not know that at all, because of the role of women at the time. This was published in 1879. Nora is driven to desperation. She's willing to leave this world to protect her husband's reputation. She's willing to sacrifice herself, her life, everything she values to protect her husband. But when the truth comes to light, he's not willing to make those sacrifices for her. And that's when she realizes that she should be more than just a doll for the desires of the men in her life. That she doesn't want to be a bird in a golden cage, because a golden cage is still a cage. And so she decides to go and discover her own purpose and her own self-worth, and she leaves her family in a shocking finale to this play. If you love morally gray actions, this one is for you. If you love questioning the law, future lawyer right here, this one is for you. If you love literature that applies not only to women but to all of humanity, but it also empowers women in the process, this one is for you. If you love some juicy drama without the non-stop action, this one is for you. Henry Gibson himself said that the task was the description of humanity, and empowering women, of course, comes along with it. So run, don't walk, to get this emotion to read. Thank you so much for making it this far. I know it's been quite a long video, but I did really miss making these videos because of how they're far more chill and just far more light than my usual content. We get to cover more books in a shorter amount of time, and I hope that this has been helpful in providing you with some information. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.